Amelia Khan sat quietly near the window of flight PK713, her favorite seat, the one where she could see clouds drift like white islands in a blue ocean. She had just finished a 3-week business trip in Dubai, and her mind was already halfway home to Lahore. The excitement of returning to her family filled her heart. She imagined her mother's cooking, her father's soft smile, and her little brother running to hug her at the airport. It was a normal morning, the kind of day that feels peaceful and predictable. The flight attendants moved down the aisle offering drinks and snacks. A baby cried somewhere at the back while an elderly couple across the aisle whispered to each other, trying to solve a crossword puzzle. Everything seemed ordinary, and Amelia relaxed in her seat taking a sip of her coffee. She smiled when the pilot's voice came over the speaker, calm and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. We're expecting a smooth flight to Lahore with clear skies ahead. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey." Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, letting the soft hum of the engines lull her into a half-sleep. The cabin lights were dim and the air felt cool and still. Time seemed to pass gently. About 2 hours later, the peaceful rhythm of the flight began to change. It started with a small announcement from the pilot. His tone was still calm, but there was something different, a slight hesitation in his words. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a brief communication issue with air traffic control. Please remain seated. There is no cause for concern." People looked at each other. Some ignored it, thinking it was routine, but Amelia noticed the flight attendants exchanging short glances, the kind that speak without words. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, moved quickly to the front of the plane, her face serious. Amelia felt a strange feeling rise inside her. Not exactly fear, but an uneasy curiosity. She turned to the man sitting beside her, who was reading a newspaper. "Do you think it's something serious?" she asked quietly. He shrugged. "Probably just a radio glitch." "Happens sometimes," he said, but his fingers gripped the paper tightly. Minutes passed, then half an hour. The pilot hadn't spoken again. The airplane began to make a wide turn, the kind that passengers could feel deep in their stomachs. People started whispering now, wondering if they had changed course. A mother across the aisle clutched her child's hand and kept looking toward the window. Amelia tried to calm herself. She took a deep breath and looked outside. The sky was bright and endless, with no sign of storm or trouble. Then she saw it, a small dark shape far off in the distance moving fast. At first she thought it was another plane passing by, but it didn't move away. It got closer. Then she saw another one on the other side, 2 jets, sleek and gray, flying beside them. Her heart skipped. She leaned forward, pressing her face to the glass. "What are those?" she whispered. The man beside her leaned too. "Those are fighter jets." His voice dropped low. "Why would they be here?" The tension in the cabin grew thick. Passengers began pointing, murmuring louder now. One flight attendant tried to calm everyone down, her smile shaky. "Please remain seated. Everything is under control." But the sight outside was hard to ignore. 2 military jets flying side by side with their plane, close enough to see the glint of sunlight on their wings. Amelia's hands trembled slightly. She didn't understand. Why would fighter jets be near a passenger flight? She turned on her phone to check for Wi-Fi, but there was none. She wished she could message her family. Time slowed. The flight continued smoothly, but the air inside felt heavy. Some passengers began to pray quietly, their heads bowed. Others stared out the windows in disbelief. Amelia looked at the elderly woman sitting behind her. The woman's face was pale, her lips trembling. Without thinking, Amelia reached out and held her hand gently. "It's okay," she said softly. "We'll be fine." The woman nodded, tears in her eyes, grateful for the comfort of a stranger. The plane kept flying, and the 2 jets stayed on either side, steady, protective, but also mysterious. It was like something out of a movie, yet too real to be fiction. Amelia tried to read the faces of the fighter pilots, but they were too far away. Still, something about their closeness made her feel safer, even though she didn't know why they were there. An hour passed like this. The passengers had grown quiet, waiting for answers that didn't come. Some tried to joke nervously, but most just sat still, listening to the faint roar of engines around them. Amelia thought about her parents again, how her father always said, There's a reason behind everything, even if we don't see it yet. She closed her eyes and repeated those words silently, clinging to them like a lifeline. The cabin lights flickered for a second, and then the captain's voice returned, slightly distorted through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still in contact procedures with ground control. Please stay calm. You are safe. The word safe helped, but only a little. Amelia looked back out at the window. The jets were still there, keeping perfect formation. The sight was both frightening and oddly beautiful. Machines of war flying to protect a plane full of ordinary people. She thought about the pilots in those jets. The courage it must take to fly that close, ready for anything but hoping nothing goes wrong. Maybe they had families waiting for them too. As the sun began to set, painting the clouds orange and gold, Amelia took a deep breath. The fear inside her slowly turned into quiet respect. She didn't know what would happen next, but she understood one thing. Someone out there was watching over them, guiding them safely through the vast sky. The flight continued, calm but filled with silent prayers. No one spoke loudly now. It was as if every passenger knew they were part of something rare, something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Amelia rested her head against the window and whispered a short prayer of gratitude. The jets outside stayed steady like two guardian angels of steel and fire. She was just a passenger, just one of many, but in that moment, she felt connected to every person on that plane, and to the invisible hands in the sky guiding them all home. The sky outside was glowing softly as the sun dipped lower on the horizon. The golden light spilled across the airplane wings, painting everything in shades of orange and red. Inside the cabin, time felt frozen. No one really knew what was happening, but everyone could sense that this was not an ordinary flight anymore. Amelia sat quietly in her seat, still holding the old woman's hand. She could hear faint whispers behind her, passengers wondering about the two fighter jets still flying beside them. The tension in the air was thick but silent, like the world had stopped moving. The pilot had made no new announcements. The only sound was the low hum of the engines and the faint rustle of people shifting nervously in their seats. Every time Amelia looked out the window, she saw the gray jet still there, steady, confident, and powerful. Its wings shone under the setting sun, and she could almost see the pilot's helmet inside the cockpit. She tried to imagine what he was thinking. Was he watching them closely? Was he worried? Or was he calm and professional, just doing his duty? Somewhere deep inside, she hoped he knew how much comfort his presence was giving to everyone on that plane. But Amelia didn't know that. Beyond those windows, a quiet storm was unfolding. The plane had lost all contact with the air traffic control tower. For over an hour, no one on the ground knew what the plane's situation was, whether it was hijacked, malfunctioning, or in distress. According to international protocol, when a commercial aircraft stops responding, military jets are sent to intercept and visually check what's going on. That's why the two fighter jets had appeared. In the control rooms hundreds of miles away, teams of people were watching blinking dots on radar screens, trying to make sense of what was happening. They could see the passenger plane's signal, but it wasn't answering calls. The silence was alarming. And so, two Air Force pilots were ordered to approach the flight to ensure the safety of everyone, both on board and on the ground. Up in the sky, those two pilots, call signs Falcon 1 and Falcon 2, flew in formation beside the passenger plane. Through radio silence, they used hand signals, trying to communicate with the captain. Inside the cockpit, the passenger plane's pilots understood what was happening. They nodded back, showing that everything was stable, though their communication system had failed completely. The jets continued their silent escort, watching closely. Their mission was simple: make sure this plane was safe, guide it back to friendly airspace, and protect it if anything went wrong. Inside the cabin, passengers had no idea of these details. To them, it was a mystery filled with fear and wonder. The mother holding her child was now softly humming a lullaby to calm her baby. The man with the newspaper had stopped reading altogether and stared at the floor, lost in thought. Even the flight attendants, though composed, were visibly tense. Amelia tried to distract herself. She looked down at the small bracelet on her wrist, a gift from her younger brother. It had a tiny silver charm shaped like wings. He'd told her once, "Whenever you fly, remember these wings will bring you home." She smiled faintly at the memory, even as tears burned her eyes. Suddenly, the seatbelt sign blinked again. The captain's voice came over the speakers, this time steadier than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are following safety procedures. There is no immediate danger. Please remain calm, stay seated, and trust our crew." The calmness in his tone helped a little. People took deep breaths. Some even smiled faintly, trying to act brave for their children or elderly companions. Amelia nodded to the woman beside her, whispering, "See? We're fine. Everything will be okay." Outside, the fighter jets adjusted their position slightly, coming even closer. Their movements were precise and controlled, almost like a dance in the air. Every time the passenger plane shifted altitude, the jets matched it perfectly. The coordination was mesmerizing. Amelia couldn't stop watching. In her mind, she began to wonder about the pilots inside those jets. Did they have families too? Did they know that dozens of hearts inside this passenger plane were depending on them? She wished she could thank them somehow, even just wave or smile. The old woman beside her finally spoke after a long silence. "They look so brave," she whispered. "Like angels made of metal." Amelia nodded. "Yes," she replied softly. "Maybe that's what they are." As darkness slowly filled the sky, the airplane lights flickered on. The interior glowed warmly, but everyone's eyes were still drawn to the windows. The sight of those jets against the fading light was unforgettable. Some passengers even took photos quietly, though their hands were shaking. Inside the cockpit, the captain and co-pilot were fully focused. They followed the fighter jet's instructions carefully. Without radio contact, everything depended on visual signals. The co-pilot held a flashlight to communicate through the window, signaling that the passengers were safe and calm. The fighter pilots acknowledged with a gentle roll of their wings, a sign of understanding. The moment felt unreal. Two worlds, civilian and military, connected silently high above the earth, bound by trust and duty. Back in the cabin, Amelia tried to relax. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. Memories of her family filled her mind. Her mother's warm voice, her father waiting with coffee, her brother waving from the arrival's gate. She imagined their faces, unaware that her plane was being escorted by two military jets at that very moment. The thought was strange but comforting. Then something changed, a faint crackle in the speakers. The passengers looked up. It was the captain again, his voice slightly clearer this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, our technical team is working to restore full communication. We are being assisted and everything is under control. Please remain calm. You are safe." Those last two words, "you are safe," seemed to wash away the fear that had built up over the hours. Amelia exhaled deeply. She turned once more to the window, watching the fighter jet glide alongside. The pilot inside gave a small tilt of his aircraft, a gesture so subtle it almost looked like a wave. Amelia smiled softly. Somehow in that simple motion she felt hope return. She realized something beautiful, that even in moments of fear, humanity has a way of protecting itself. People who had never met from completely different worlds were working together without words. The silent teamwork in the sky was something she would never forget. The passengers began to calm down. The mother's baby had fallen asleep. The old woman was quietly praying, but her voice was peaceful now. Even the flight attendants had regained their smiles, moving softly down the aisles, checking on everyone. Outside, the stars had begun to appear. Faint lights scattered across the darkening sky. The two jets stayed close, their lights blinking gently in rhythm with the planes. Amelia watched them and whispered to herself, "Please don't leave us yet." The night deepened, but the fear had faded. What replaced it was something stronger, faith. Faith in the unseen hands guiding them, in the quiet bravery of strangers, and in the promise of reaching home. Amelia didn't know it yet, but the next hour would bring something even more unforgettable, when those fighter jets would make a choice that no one on the plane would ever forget. The night sky stretched endlessly around the aircraft. Tiny stars twinkled far above, and the dark clouds below looked like quiet mountains of smoke. The passengers were calm now, but no one had forgotten the hours of silence and tension they had faced. The two fighter jets still flew beside them, their steady lights glowing softly through the darkness. Amelia kept looking out the window. She felt a strange comfort knowing they were still there. The gray jets, sharp and beautiful, seemed to be watching over them, like guardians of the night sky. Every few minutes, one of the jets would move slightly closer or farther away, adjusting its position, but it never left their side. Inside the cockpit, the passenger plane's captain and co-pilot were working carefully. After several hours of effort, they finally received a faint signal from the control tower. The static crackled through the speakers. PK-713, this is Lahore Air Traffic Control. Do you copy? The captain's hands shook slightly as he pressed the response button. Lahore Control, this is PK-713. We hear you loud and clear. Communication restored. The relief in his voice was obvious. The control tower immediately responded, confirming their location and guiding them on a safe route back home. Inside the cabin, the captain's voice finally came through the speakers again, this time clear and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, we have re-established communication with ground control. Everything is under control now. Please remain seated as we prepare to continue our flight toward Lahore. We are safe. The moment he said those words, "We are safe," applause broke out. People clapped, some even cried softly. The mother hugged her child tightly. The old woman beside Amelia covered her face with her hands, whispering a prayer of thanks. Amelia felt tears fill her eyes too. She wasn't sure if they came from fear, relief, or just the overwhelming sense that they had survived something extraordinary together. She turned to the window again and whispered softly, "Thank you." Outside, one of the fighter jets blinked its lights twice, almost as if it had heard her. As the plane followed the new course toward Lahore, the passengers began to relax fully for the first time in hours. Flight attendants moved around with calm smiles, offering water and comforting words. A quiet peace filled the air, mixed with laughter here and there as people shared their feelings. Amelia leaned back in her seat, feeling her heartbeat slow. She could see the city lights in the far distance, faint but growing brighter as they got closer. Home was no longer a dream. It was real waiting below. But even as the plane moved steadily toward safety, the two fighter jets stayed with them, keeping watch. Amelia couldn't take her eyes off them. She wondered if they would stay all the way to the airport or turn back before landing. She didn't want them to go just yet. In the control towers and military bases below, officials were coordinating the final steps of the escort. The jets were instructed to guide the passenger plane until it was well within safe airspace, ensuring there would be no further issues. It wasn't common for fighter pilots to stay this long with a civilian flight. But these two had made a decision. They wouldn't leave until every soul on that plane was safely home. Inside the passenger cabin, Amelia began talking softly with the man beside her. "Do you think they'll follow us all the way?" she asked. He smiled slightly, still emotional. "Maybe. They've come this far, haven't they? I think they'll finish what they started." She nodded. Something about that answer made her feel warm inside. The fear that had once filled her chest was gone, replaced by gratitude, not just for the pilots in the jets, but for everyone who had worked quietly behind the scenes to keep them safe. As the flight neared Lahore, the captain made another announcement. His voice was full of emotion this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching Lahore airspace. We have been escorted safely by 2 Air Force jets. Let's take a moment to thank them for their guidance and protection." Every passenger looked out the windows. The fighter jets were still there, gleaming under the moonlight. For a moment, the entire cabin was silent. Some passengers placed their hands over their hearts. Others whispered small prayers or waved through the windows. Amelia pressed her palm to the glass. She didn't know if the pilots could see her, but she wanted them to feel her gratitude. As the city lights of Lahore spread below them, shining like tiny stars on the ground, the captain spoke again. "We are cleared to land. Please fasten your seatbelts." The plane began to descend smoothly. The engine's roar softened, and the wings tilted gently as they glided toward the runway. Amelia could see familiar landmarks now. The glowing roads, the small houses, the twinkling lights of home. The 2 fighter jets stayed close until the very end. When the plane lined up with the runway, they slowly rose higher, banking away in perfect synchronization. Amelia watched them go, their silhouettes fading against the dark sky. Her heart ached with gratitude. They had brought them home safely and silently, without ever asking for thanks. As the wheels touched the ground, the cabin filled with applause once again. Some passengers cried openly. Others laughed, clapping and hugging the people next to them. The sense of relief was so strong it was almost like light itself. bright, warm, and pure. The plane slowed to a stop. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, their red and blue lights flashing. But there was no panic now, only relief. The doors opened, and the cool night air rushed in. When Amelia stepped out, her feet touched the ground, but her mind was still somewhere above, in the sky where two unknown heroes had flown beside her. She looked up instinctively, hoping to catch one last glimpse of them, but they were gone, already flying back to their base. Later that night, the news spread across the country. Flight PK-713 escorted home safely by Air Force jets after communication loss, the headlines read. The story reached television channels, newspapers, and social media. People praised the Air Force pilots for their courage and professionalism. But for Amelia, it wasn't just a headline. It was something deeply personal. She had lived through every moment of it. She knew the fear of silence, the comfort of strangers, and the quiet strength of unseen protectors. As she sat at home later, her family around her, her mother holding her close and her brother proudly saying, "See, I told you the wings would bring you home," Amelia smiled through tears. That night, she stepped outside and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, she imagined those two fighter pilots flying missions, ready to protect others just as they had protected her. She whispered softly, "Thank you once more." She had boarded that flight as just another passenger, tired, quiet, and ordinary. But by the time she returned home, she carried something extraordinary inside her, a story of faith, courage, and humanity that she would never forget for the rest of her life. And every time she looked up at the sky after that day, she no longer saw it as just a place of clouds and air. To her, it was a reminder that even in the vastness of the world, someone somewhere is always watching over us.